so I'm going to read to you from a scene in this novel, Russian Winter, that just came out. And it's in part a historical novel, but also has a contemporary storyline. There are two intertwining storylines that together tell two love stories and also solve a mystery. And the historical component is takes place in post-World War II Moscow. And the present-day storyline is set in Boston. And the kind of link between them is a character named Nina Rovskaya, who was had defected to the West and ended up eventually in Boston, and is elderly in the present storyline, but was a Bolshoi dancer. And we see her life in the past. And what happens when I've noticed when I give readings is people are always very intrigued by the Russian sections, but I actually really like the American sections, so I thought, I'm going to read one of those today. The American storyline, one of the main, he's a major protagonist actually, is a man named Greer who grew up, spent the first 10 years of his life in Russia, went to then Norway, Paris, ended up in the US, and is a professor of Russian, a translator of Russian poetry, and believes that he has some connection to that dancer. This is a scene from his point of view, and he is going to the Dunkin' Donuts to meet, Dunkin' Donuts because I'm from Boston, he's going to meet a colleague of his who is an elderly Hungarian poet who once, he defected to the West after the failed uprising in 1956 and was kind of briefly the new hot thing as kind of a representative of that world to the West. But at this point, now he's about 70, nobody knows who he is, and that he was once this amazing poet. But Gregory appreciates his friendship and doesn't know why he's been asked to meet him, but he's going to go there. And I'll finally just say, this scene actually starts out in Gregory's memory in Russia. So we'll be briefly in Russia, and then we'll be back in Boston. His first memory was of winter. A Sunday, with his parents after a heavy snowfall, walking past Red Square. Everything's snowy, everything's snow. The square is vast and quiet. There's just one area where people are allowed to cross, and in the distance they look like black dots, slowly moving against an expanse of white. Gregory is just 3 years old. He stares at the people dots, entranced, while his mother urges him to keep moving, to keep warm. He hears the crows cawing as they fly overhead and looks up. The sky, too, is white, except for the birds. When one swoops down lower than the others, Gregory says, "Look at the bird," because it's something he knows. "Voron," says his mother, the word for raven, the biggest and blackest of all. "Voron," he repeats, but Fyodor corrects them, as is his nature. "No, Vorona. See, they have a little gray on them." Looking up, pointing. "Vorona," Gregory repeats. Caws in the thick white sky. Vorona. And people small as dots filing across the big white square. Not a male Voron, but a female Vorona. Just a touch of gray. The very slim difference between two such similar things. Making his way along the poorly shoveled sidewalk of St. Mary's Street, Gregory considered that his vocation, his attention to the smallest details of language and image, slight shifts in words and meaning, the difference that a single letter could make, must have begun there in the square, in that moment, on that other snowy day. Subtle changes in sound and sense, words contained in other, different words. Even now, Gregory often found himself noting tiny surprises in written English, that intimates contained inmates, just as friend contained fiend. He hunched his shoulders against the thought and entered the fluorescent-lit Dunkin' Donuts to meet Zoltan. There he was, the back of his head, the grizzled, thinning hair hunched over a booth by the window, the tabletop spread with many sheets of paper. Gregory took a seat across from him on the hard scoop of bench and removed his gloves, quietly clearing his throat. "Ah!" Zoltan looked up as if shocked. "You! You know I'm always punctual." To Gregory, Zoltan had said on the telephone, "Meet me at the new cafe I found. Much better than that other one. across from the St. Mary's tea stop, with a pink and orange sign. Zoltan would spend all morning here probably, with the business people and shopkeepers and construction workers rushing in and out, and the television buzzing from its perch up on the wall, and the bag ladies rustling about, and the employees gossiping in Portuguese. Grigori unbundled himself from his coat, but remained in his hat and scarf. The place was not well heated. "You know what a woman just said?" Zoltan asked. "She said, days like this, keeping warm's a chore." "Oh, it doesn't sound the same with my accent." "But you hear the poetry, don't you? Warm's a chore." He wrote it into his notebook, and Grigori had to smile. Not only was Zoltan able to see cafes where others did not, but he found poetry too in unexpected places. As if aware of Grigori's thoughts, Zoltan said, somewhat defensively, "There's good light here for reading, not like that ghoulish campus place." He rippled his shoulders in a theatrical shiver. The murmuring of so many overactive egos, I hadn't realized how it was weighing me down before. The deadening chatter of academics all around me. The truth was, Zoltan had been kicked out of the campus coffee house just the other day. Grigori had heard it from one of the Spanish professors. In a prolonged burst of creativity, Zoltan had spent even longer hours there than usual, until the cafe management apparently thought him some kind of squatter and requested that he no longer spend all day there at his favorite seat up front, showcased by the window. Zoltan took a sip of coffee from his styrofoam cup. "Excellent coffee here, Grigori. You must try it." "I'm afraid I don't have much time. You said you had something to discuss." "Yes, very important. I would like to ask you, respectfully and with friendship, to be my literary executor." It was nothing Grigori had expected. Thaddeus Weller had agreed to do it, you know, but I recently had the sad news that he's passed away. "I'm so sorry." Grigori had never heard of him. Tragic, really. I asked myself when I heard the news, who else do I know who truly understands me, without, of course, there being any odd tension between us? That's the problem, you know, with my fellow poets. There's competition, envy, you know. With you, that's not an issue. And as a translator, you understand poetry thoroughly and emotionally. And then you and I, we have a common sensibility. "Well," Grigori said, "this is a flattering surprise. Normally such a job might have gone to the writer's offspring or spouse, but Zoltan had neither." "I'm very honored, although I am curious to know just what you see as our common sensibility." Zoltan leaned forward on his elbows. "You have that past buried inside you that most people can't see." He nodded. "I was older than you when I left my country, but I think the upheaval of starting over, with that other history still a part of you, that heavy weight, is something that we have in common, don't you?" Grigori thought of how this country, one that offered a fresh start to all that washed up on its shores, had somehow diminished not just Zoltan, but Grigori's parents too, in a way that the other countries along their trajectory had not, lessened their authority, muted their brilliance. Fine qualities of the mind simply were not as appreciated in this home of the brave. But all Grigori said was, "A common sensibility, yes." "It's not an enormous oath," Zoltan said quickly. "I realize that you'll need help with the untranslated works. My journals are in English." He gestured toward a thick, faded, hardcover notebook on the table. 23 volumes. Though Zoltan's first and second books had been translated into various languages, none of his subsequent volumes of poetry had found life outside of the Hungarian. Grigori supposed it must pain Zoltan to think that his most mature work, the fullest blossoming of his talent, happened to have been composed in a tongue that, despite its beauty, many viewed as a linguistic joke. "Well," Grigori said, "I'm honored by your proposal. I can't see why I wouldn't agree to it." Zoltan smiled, clearly pleased. Even now, viewed from a certain angle, one could still find the dandy there, as much as he might blend in with the other dubious characters who whiled their time away at the Dunkin' Donuts. Think about it first, although I do hope you'll say yes. And I'll stop it there.